everyone to smile. And then Vicky, you can start with the, well, let the Spanish speaker speak first before we start with the icebreaker activity. Okay, everybody, admitting folks, we are live now. Vicky, your show.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks for staying with us. I hope you have enjoyed your last sessions, and we're so glad that you were able to join us to hear our amazing keynote, Mr. Mike Veny, who's going to be coming up with us shortly. But while we're waiting, can you put in the chat one word that describes your experience that you've had with this conference so far? And if you use more than one, that's okay. But one is sufficient. So just type in a word that you think best describes your experience that you've had with this conference this week, really, these past 2 days. It feels like it's been a week. I will turn this over.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos todos a esta charla. Mientras que estamos esperando que todos entren, les voy a pedir un favor. Si pueden escribir en el chat una palabra que represente cómo se ha sentido usted durante estas reuniones, durante este congreso. Una sola palabra que represente cómo se ha sentido. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Bianca. So yes, we are still coming in. And again, we thank you guys for coming in for this final session or the final keynote that we have for the conference. It's been an amazing conference and you guys have been so interactive and so engaging. I know that's always a fear when we do things virtually, that we won't have the participation and involvement, but you guys have been superstars and we're excited that you're here with us this afternoon. So just a few things that we want to make sure that you're aware of before we get into this conversation. And I'll pause for interpretation if needed.
Primero que todo, mientras que les damos la bienvenida a todas las personas que están en esta reunión, quiero agradecerles a todos por su trabajo y por haber estado acompañándonos con nosotros esta semana durante estas reuniones. Su contribución ha sido muy, muy importante. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. So again, welcome as you guys are coming in. This is the final keynote session for the 22nd Central Texas African American Family Support Conference. My name is Vicky Coffey. I'm with the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health, and I'm your moderator for today's session. So shortly, we're going to enjoy the keynote entitled Transforming Stigma into Strength. But while we wait for more people to join us, again, if you can type in the chat one word that describes your experience that you've had this week or these past 2 days at the conference, just 1 or 2 words that describe your experience. Would love to see that.
I'm sorry, I got lost. I lost the communication. I lost the track.
Bianca?
I couldn't hear what you say, Vicky. Sorry.
Bianca, don't worry. I'm going to put you back in your chat, in your channel. So
okay,
don't say anything again. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay.
Great. Keep it coming. One word that describes your experience that you've had at the conference this week. Please insert that in the chat. As we get ready, we have Mr. Mike Veny in the holding tank right now, waiting for us to share with us his exciting presentation. And we have people joining us still. So thank you guys again for being with us this afternoon. Okay. Again, we are also broadcasting this in Spanish. And so we thank Bianca for being here with us to share this with us as well, so that we can make sure that we are being inclusive and that everybody is going to get to be a part of this exciting afternoon keynote. Before the session starts, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors, St. David's Foundation and the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. Thank you guys for making this keynote possible. We do have a few housekeeping rules. Of course, we've been keeping house all afternoon and all day. So you guys should have this figured out by now. But just to remind you that we're wanting this to be a safe and supportive space. So please help us maintain a respectful and inclusive environment. You want to make sure and mute yourself at all times. And to use the chat function, you are chat champions at this point. So continue to use the chat champion to use the chat function in Whova to interact with each other and to ask questions for our presenter, Mr. Veny. You're going to use the Q&A function in Whova. If you're feeling overwhelmed or you need to talk to someone during this session, please call 512-472-4357 or 512-472-HELP. You're going to press 1 and then press 1 again for immediate emotional support. Between the sessions, reminder that you can visit our comfort suite. We've got some great folks in there that are working hard to provide a safe place where you can just chat and talk with someone who will understand and support your needs. You'll find the comfort suite in the community under the main navigation tab in Whova. And then lastly, we have a number of surveys. You guys have also gotten very used to those as well. So if you've registered for CEUs, please check the chat for links. The first link will sign you in for your CEU, so please sign in at the beginning of the session. And then after the workshop, there's going to be another link for your CEU evaluation. So please check on that link for a short evaluation, which also includes the CEU request form. Once you've completed the evaluation, you're going to be taken to that page with a link where you can find your CEU certificate. And then lastly, the third link is the session evaluation. Please take that survey. You might win that $25 gift card. So definitely take that survey and let us know what you thought about the conference, about this day, and about your experience. So now, please joining me in welcoming my friend and partner, Ms. Abina Asante, the Senior Program Officer at St. David's Foundation, to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Vicki. It's a pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Again, my name is Abina Asante, and I'm going to share a few words about Mr. Mike Veny. So Mike Veny was determined to overcome a lifetime of serious mental health challenges to become a professional drummer and a certified corporate wellness specialist. He's the author of the best-selling book, Transforming Stigma: How to Become a Mental Wellness Superhero. His expertise and life experience have been featured on several media channels, including ABC, NBC, and CBS News. As a 2017 PM 360 Elite Award winner, Mr. Veny was recognized as one of the 100 most influential people in the healthcare industry. As co-host of the Better Mental podcast, Mike shares insightful experience as a business owner living with mental health challenges. His captivating presentations are popular with companies including Microsoft, CVS Health, T-Mobile, Heineken, Salesforce, and the Wounded Warrior Project. With a busy schedule that includes writing, speaking, and teaching continuing education courses, you can feel confident knowing that you will have an enjoyable experience in this presentation. In his spare time, he enjoys weight training, meditating for 20 minutes twice a day, and eating a good bone-in ribeye steak cooked medium rare. He lives in New York City and is addicted to buying luggage, along with watching YouTube videos on how to pack a suitcase. I need lessons on that, Mike. His packing checklist for business trips is one of the most prized possessions. Central Texas, here is Mike Veny, and I hope you enjoy this time with him. Thank you very much.
For the past 2 years, people throughout the world have experienced anger, grief, and fear at an unprecedented level. The statistics around mental health are just rising around the world. And of people who contracted the COVID-19 coronavirus, 1/3 of them developed mental health challenges, either as a result of what the virus did to their body, the trauma of the whole experience, or some combination of the two. My name is Mike Veny, and I'm excited to be here today. I was hoping I could do it actually in Texas because I love coming to Texas to speak, but you are in my mind right now. Your good food is in my mind. I love eating in Texas because you have really, really good food. We're going to be talking about transforming stigma. And one thing I want to let you know is that in this presentation, you're going to learn how to transform it, not in theory, but actually in the next 24 hours. My company is an ISET accredited provider. We do continuing education, and I'm a certified corporate wellness specialist. Basically, corporate America hires me to come in and work with employees and promote mental wellness in the workplace because we're in the workplace 1/3 of the day. A few things before we get started. This learning experience is informed by psychological research and my own life experience and my work with clients. Also, as was said before, if you get triggered by something that I say, I will be talking about self-harm and a little bit about suicide, not in too much detail. Please talk to someone or call 911. It's really, really important that you do that. A few things I want to go over. We're going to be talking about what keeps people from asking for help, especially in the African-American community. We're going to learn how to use self-care to protect your mental health, how to have conversations about it, and how you can help someone else who might be struggling. Before we go any further, I would like to make a very special dedication, though. I want to dedicate this presentation to someone who was very special in my life, my hamster. He's no longer with me. He passed away about 10 years ago. And he was actually not a regular hamster. He was a dwarf hamster. He was about 2 inches long. And he was my friend and pretty good pet, actually, for the most part. He had a good vibe about him. But one day I went to go pet him and he tried to bite me. Never again am I going to try to pet him. But he was a good pet otherwise. One day I noticed my little hamster had something in his eye. He was squinting like this. So I said, oh no, my hamster's sick. So I made my first ever trip to a veterinarian. Interesting experience, by the way. I get to the veterinarian, we get in the office, and the veterinarian puts on rubber gloves and tries to hold my little hamster to figure out what's going on with his eye. And my little hamster bites the veterinarian. The veterinarian leaves the room and now has to get a nurse to come in with him. So now we have 2 grown adults in a room trying to restrain this little 2-inch hamster to figure out what's in his eye. And they're both holding him. And next thing I know, he bites her. She leaves the room. She was so angry. She said she's not going to go back in the room with that hamster. Finally, they get 3 grown adults to come into the room, restrain my hamster, and figure out what was going on. At that moment, I took out my cell phone and took a picture. That's my hamster right there. And, to be very honest with you, seeing my hamster struggle and get restrained like that made me say to myself, I don't ever want to go to the veterinarian ever again. Because seeing what I saw with my hamster reminds me of being in the mental hospital, and I've been there way too many times. I've been battling mental health challenges for most of my life, and we don't have time today to go over everything that I've been through. So I'll describing it by describing something I love deeply in this world, food. If you want to be my friend, you got to like food. I would like you to picture an oven in a kitchen, not a regular kitchen oven, but like an industrial strength Viking restaurant oven, 4 burners. On the top right burner, simmering in a frying pan, is my obsessive compulsive disorder. Constantly ruminating about stuff. I'm trying to give a presentation to you right now, and so many things are happening in my mind. Makes it hard for me to focus. On the lower right burner in a frying pan is my anxiety. I don't know how I'm coming off to you right now, but I feel the anxiety in my chest. This is hard for me to do. On the top left burner, simmering in a frying pan, is my anger and depression. But on the bottom left burner is a stock pot. So I take the ingredients from each frying pan, my obsessive compulsive disorder, my anxiety, and my anger and depression, put it in a stock pot, close the lid, and turn up the heat. That's a problem waiting to happen. And if you're following me so far, I'm not talking about a kitchen that's in a restaurant or in my home. The kitchen's in my head, and I'm in it right now. I've been in it my whole life. In some ways, it's kind of cool. Like it's like a fun house. There's a slanted mirror right there and a curved one right there, because everywhere I look, everything's about me and it's distorted. But ultimately, I stay in that kitchen because it protects me from you, because deep down inside, I think you're going to hurt me. It all started when I was younger. I had a wonderful childhood. I grew up in Long Island, New York, and my mom was my biggest supporter. She loved me dearly. And she passed away about 6 years ago, but stayed with my dad until the end and did her best for me and my little brother. My dad, that's my dad, by the way. We took that picture 2 weeks ago. I actually invited him to this presentation. So if you see a Michael Veny in the chat, it's not me, it's my dad. You can say hi to him. And hi, Daddy, if you're watching. But that's my dad right there. Super supportive of me as well and my younger brother. But we started to notice around age 5, around age 6, that I started to have some behavior problems. I started to have temper tantrums all the time. I would be sad, I would be angry, and my parents didn't know what to do. I personally thought I was a bad kid. And my parents tried to correct my behavior. By the way, someone is unmuted. Would you all mind muting, please? Thank you. And so basically, I thought I was a bad kid. And I didn't know, what it meant to be a good kid. I was just feeling emotional. I would feel angry. I'd feel upset. And I didn't know what to do. But we got to, kindergarten with me. And I think at the end of kindergarten, my parents had had enough. They were tired of my bad behavior. So they decided to put me in this place called Catholic school, where they figured the nuns would straighten me out. This is not going to go good, right? But I'll still tell you the story. 2nd grade was good. 3rd grade was okay. But in 4th grade, we all had this experience in school. And you're going to know what I'm talking about. That experience of there was always that one teacher in school nobody wanted as a teacher. Like they were considered, I don't know, mean, evil, or an alien or something like that. Well, this one teacher in my school was named Sister Pat. She was known as the mean and evil nun. And I knew from day one, Sister Pat and I were not going to finish the school year together. I just knew it was not going to work out. And one day I was sitting in class, beginning of 4th grade, and I'm just sitting like I am now. And she yelled at me and told me to wipe the smile off my face. I didn't know smiling was a problem, but I got angry and I said, no. And everybody in class goes, ooh. So Sister Pat then started yelling at me, and I said some things back to her that I'm not going to repeat right now. She then approached me and tried to grab me by my arm and pull me out of my desk. And I tried as a little 4th grader to punch my teacher. She then threw holy water on me and called me the devil. I took the holy water and threw it back at her and said, put this on your wrinkles. I was expelled from school that day. My parents had a very serious talk with me about respect, a very serious talk. And I just told them nobody has a right to talk down to me. And they said, you cannot act like that if an adult tells you to do something. But we didn't get anywhere with it. Either way, I'm expelled from school beginning of 4th grade. So they then put me in a public school where my uncle was the principal. Long story short, after 3 weeks in that school, several fights, and a desk mysteriously flying out of my hands in the direction of my teacher, I was expelled from that school. The rest of 4th grade, though, best school year ever. I got to stay home every day. That's back in a time period when it was okay to stay home. I think most of us are done with staying home. But back then it was great. I got to stay home every day. This tutor, she would come to the house. This woman was so scared of me. She didn't really make eye contact with me. The summer between 4th and 5th grade, my parents took me to see the Batman movie. Now, I take my superheroes very seriously. So let me explain which movie I'm talking about. This is not Christian Bale starring as Batman or Ben Affleck. It was Michael Keaton starring as Batman, and Jack Nicholson was the Joker. I loved the movie so much. I was so excited, and I asked my mom if I could be Batman or the Joker for Halloween, and she said, if you behave, you can be Batman or the Joker. I don't know if it was that movie or something that happened after it, or I don't know, but I came home and I got angry at a level that I never had before. I got so angry that I started punching things in my parents' home and destroying things. And the more they would try to stop me, the angrier I would get. This was going on for hours. And they tried to restrain me, discipline, it didn't work. I was just angry and I couldn't stop. And the next thing I know, I was put in a mental hospital. And that's a scary place, especially when you're a kid. My parents didn't want anyone to know about it because, they said this would be really bad if people found out. So I knew that this was a secret I had to keep. Well, they let me out in 3 weeks. In 5th grade, I was put in special education. Probably had the one teacher in school I never messed with. I saw this woman recently. She's about 5 feet tall. She still scares me, but I found a way to annoy her. I would tap on my desk and play drum beats. Love tapping on my desk. And eventually they let me go into the drum class. Oh, holding drumsticks was the greatest feeling in the world. I'll never forget that day. I think about it all the time. This morning, I picked up my drumsticks and felt that same feeling. Love that feeling. And for the most part, though, I was not in drum class because you can't spend a lot of time there. You have to go back to school and go home. And when I was not in the drum class, I was experiencing this intense sadness that I would later learn is called depression. My depression is so intense that I feel physical pain in my body. Earlier this afternoon, I was in pain because of my depression. That's how intense it is. But oftentimes when it comes to mental health, we simply want a solution to the problem. We just want a solution. That's why we're all here at this conference, right? We want some solutions to things. Well, I had a solution. 10 years old, I came home from school, September 29th, 1989. And I went to the medicine cabinet and found my mental health medication. And I swallowed an entire bottle of pills and almost ended up dying by suicide. If my mom didn't find me, I wouldn't be alive right now. And I'm really grateful that she found me. But at the time I was really angry. When I look at this picture that I have on the screen, this is my 5th grade picture, age 10. Yeah, I'm smiling, sort of, but I can see the sadness in my eyes. I can see that sadness. And it's so interesting about mental health is that, we can all fake it with smiles and pretend like everything's okay, but be battling the most difficult battle behind the scenes. After that, things started to get worse. I was spiraling down rabbit holes. 7th grade, I'm a lot bigger and I'm a lot stronger and I'm going into rages more at home. But I want to be honest with you, when you're in 7th grade and you're going into a rage, that's not a rage anymore. It's called violence. And I'm ashamed to admit it, but I want to tell you the truth so you can understand my story. I was violent. I was also starting to do this thing called self-harm. Self-harm is a big challenge for so many people. It's not just youth, it's also adults. And self-harm isn't one thing. It's anything that you do to harm yourself. Destructive driving is a form of self-harm. Hanging out with the wrong group of people can be a form of self-harm. But there are 3 reasons why people self-harm. 1, we do it to take away the pain. 2, it can actually become an addiction. And 3, well, some people just think it's cool. Either way, I encourage you to find more effective ways to deal with your mental health. And I'm going to be talking about those momentarily. So back to 7th grade, I am exploding and imploding. Next thing I know, I'm back in the mental hospital, this time for 6 months. My parents had to make up a coping skills story. And so they said, he's going through some stuff. They told family that I went to visit other family. They had to keep it a secret. They had to keep it a secret. They wanted to keep it a secret. They said, Mike, no one can ever know about this. Eventually, I got weekend passes to go home from the mental hospital. And when I went home from the mental hospital, my family, they wanted to do family activities like go out to eat and stuff. I didn't want to do any of that. So I would lock myself in my bedroom and play drums to LL Cool J, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Salt and Pepper. That was 7th grade. Between 7th grade and 10th grade, I was on a first name basis with the local police in the local emergency room. I was constantly acting out. I was out of control. And by the time I finished 10th grade, I had been expelled from 3 schools, hospitalized in a mental hospital 3 times, several suicide attempts, lots of self-harm, violent at home, and on about 5 different medications. All the while, my younger brother, Jason, is doing just fine. But the summer between 10th and 11th grade changed my life. I want you to listen very carefully to what happened that summer. That summer, my mom approached me with the look. Let me explain that. In my opinion, moms are the hardest working people on the planet. In my company that I own today, we got several moms on the team. They get stuff done like nobody's business. But let's be honest, Moms are the sneakiest people on the planet too. Yep, even when you're an adult. They do this thing called giving you the mommy look, where they're looking at you and they're saying one thing, but you know they're plotting something else. My mom approached me with the mommy look. She was up to something. She asked me a question. She asked me, Mike, what would make you happy? I knew she was trying to plot something, but I was thrown off because no one had ever asked me that before. I mean, I was told that I needed to learn to behave. I was yelled at, I was punished, but no one ever asked me what would make me happy. So I thought about it and realized the only thing that would make me happy is playing the drums. So I told my mom, my dad, I want to play drums all day in the house. My dad said, absolutely not my home. But my moms are sneaky, smiled at me with the mommy look and said, thank you, and just walked away. I'm the most impatient person on the planet. You can't leave me hanging like that. And so for the next several days, she was in her bedroom on the phone, making phone calls about me. She was plotting something. Finally, I confronted her and said, what's going on? And she let me know, even though no school really wanted me, that there was a performing arts high school that was open to having me as a student if I could pass an audition. I'll never forget that day. It might be the first time in my life I felt a hint of happiness. The idea of getting to play drums a good amount of the day. Well, I auditioned for the school and I got accepted. And once I got accepted, life started to change. By the way, that is a picture of me on the drums in the performing arts high school. Check out that hair right there. And those sideburns, I miss them and I think about them every day. But my grades started to go up. With the help of my psychiatrist, my medication went down to nothing. I stopped acting out at home. No more suicide attempts, no more self-harm. And for the first time, people wanted to be my friend. It was weird. So one day, this teacher yelled at me and spoke down to me. Teacher yelled at me and spoke down to me. And my fists clenched like this. You know I don't do well with that, right? But the cool thing about a performing arts high school is you have different rooms where you can practice your instrument. So I stormed out of class, went into a room to play drums by myself. Now, pause this presentation for a moment. If I were doing this in person, I actually bring a West African drum and I would play it for you. But unfortunately, I'm not able to do that right now. So you're just gonna have to imagine me drumming. I sat there doing my thing on the drums. The teacher comes in the room and says, Mike, you need to be in class. I said, I know, I'm doing my thing. He said 15 minutes. So I played for 15 more minutes. And for the first time in my life, I calmed down. It was weird. I didn't get in trouble. I didn't have to go to the mental hospital. Drums calmed me down. Several months later, I decided I wanted me a girlfriend. And the one girl that I liked, well, she wasn't having it. And I didn't know what to do with my feelings. So I stormed out of class and went into a room to play drums. Sat there just doing my thing. Teacher comes in the room and says, Mike, you need to be in class. I said, I know, I'm doing my thing. But then he asked me this question. He asked me, could I hire you to play drums in my band? Hire? At that moment, the light bulb went off in my head. When I acted out the other way, I got suspended, expelled, went to the police, the emergency room. But when I acted out on the drums, people wanted to give me money. So I approached my parents as a high school senior with the conversation no parents of a high school senior want to have when their other child is talking about law school. I said, Mom and Dad, I want to be a drummer. And their heads just went down like this. I would love to tell you that they supported me. I think they were just okay that I was okay. They just, let's just go along with it, right? But what was really interesting in my freshman year of college, I finished the first semester. Usually at the end of first semester, every guy goes out and celebrates. My friends wanted to go out. They said, Mike, you coming out with us? And I said, no, I can't come out with you because starting at age 18, I was being flown around the country, being paid thousands of dollars to play drums. One of the reasons I wanted to do this presentation today, and bear with me if I get emotional, but that first paying professional drumming gig was in Texas. So it really touches my heart whenever I get to be part of Texas. But drumming was my career for many years, and it still is to this day. I got to work in New York City, play on some Broadway show albums, some television commercials, things like that. And it gave me a living, and it was also my medication. And fast forward to today, one of the things my company does is corporate drumming in the workplace. I actually bring drums into the workplace with adults. They sit in a circle, They get real happy and sweaty and they pay me. Like, that's my job. And I just got to do that yesterday, actually. And it's a way for me to share the medication that helped me with others. But let's be honest, even though I've got some coping skills, as I told you in the beginning, I still struggle with mental health. I still struggle every day with depression, with anxiety. It's hard. And one of the things that came up for me was not just my mental health challenges, but I didn't want you to find out. My parents always said, keep it a secret. But there's certain things about mental health you just can't keep a secret. You and I might be hanging out and you might start to notice that something's a little off about me. I didn't want you to discover that, so I pushed people away. Or maybe we're working together and you notice that something's a little off about me. You might go tell the band leader, I might get fired. I didn't want people to know about it. In 2011, after a breakdown, I realized that I was stuck with my mental health challenges and I needed to learn to transform the stigma for myself because I wanted to just be me in the world, but I had to be comfortable with my mental health and you knowing about it. So I set out on a mission to learn about transforming stigma. The material I'm about to share with you, I've gotten to share with some major companies, and it's actually been an honor over the past 2 years to share this because, as you know, the entire world has been really, really struggling. I want to go over some of the reasons stigma exists. People often ask me, like, why is there a stigma? And I say, I don't know. I don't really know the answer, but I think there's some clues. One clue to think about is what I call the law of confusion and frustration. We don't like to be confused as human beings, and we don't like things that are complex and frustrating. For example, let's say 10 years from now, somebody asks you, so what happened in 2020? How the heck are you going to explain 2020 to somebody? There's so much, that happened, and it's confusing, complex, and frustrating. Years ago, I was working out in the gym. I was doing this push-up routine where you put your hand in different positions. Ended up hurting my wrist. I was trying to impress this woman in the gym. I'm not going to lie. And I realized it was a sprain, a strain, or broken wrist. Wait 2 days, and if it doesn't feel better, call the doctor. Mental health doesn't work that way. Most people don't wake up and go, I'm feeling depressed today. Maybe I should talk to a psychologist. No, typically someone discovers it for you and has to confront you about your behavior. That's one of the reasons stigma exists, the law of confusion and frustration. The second reason stigma exists is that people don't want to feel like the weird one. Let's just pretend right now you and I are in kindergarten. Let's just pretend you and I are sitting on the playground in kindergarten. You're with your friends and I'm sitting with you. And you and your friends have Nike sneakers, but I have Reebok sneakers. Chances are you're going to notice my sneakers are different and call me weird. That's what kindergartners do. They call each other weird. We think it's cute. They're going, you're weird, you're weird. But think about what they're doing. They're figuring out who is in the group and who is not in the group. And we bring that with us into elementary school, into high school, into college, into the world. No one wants to feel like the weird one. That's one of the reasons stigma exists. But I want to add another point that's not on a slide here. In the Black community, we are a culture of honor. We don't like to be disrespected. That's a no-no, actually. And sometimes we think if we admit that we're struggling, we're disrespecting ourselves. That's not true, but that's a myth. And one of the reasons stigma exists. The next slide I'm going to show you is, I think, the most important slide in this presentation. Please pay attention to this. Stigma is a 3-part cycle that starts with shame. The shame leads to silence, and the silence leads to sabotage, social injustice, self-destructive behavior, and if you're not careful, suicide. Now, check this out. The stigma is not just about you struggling. You might love someone, have a family member who's struggling, and you feel shame. And because you feel shame, you don't want to talk about it. You keep silent. And the silence leads to sabotage, social injustice, self-destructive behavior, and suicide. I'm going to show you how to transform stigma in the next 24 hours if you pay attention to what I have to say. Let's start with shame. I first had to figure out what the opposite of shame was. So I went to the most reliable resource that I could, Google. And here's what Google told me. Google told me that the opposite of shame is pride and honor. So how do you go from feeling ashamed about your mental health to pride and honor? It's very simple. It's a thing called self-care. Self-care is what you do to take care of your health when you're not in the presence of a medical professional. Now, when some people think of self-care, if you go on Instagram right now and you look up self-care, you get pictures like this on Instagram. People think it's, you're sitting on the beach chilling, going on vacation. That's luxury. Self-care is what you do for your health when you're not in the presence of a medical professional. For example, brushing your teeth. Hopefully you brushed your teeth today. That was a form of self-care. If you washed your hands, form of self-care. So it's important to be intentional about that. I know there are many of you that are on this presentation that are thinking, well, that sounds great, Mike. I don't have time for self-care. Well, I'm going to end that right now. I'm going to show you some ways you can start practicing self-care right now during this presentation. I have a very special camera here on my computer, and I can see through it, and I know something about you on the other side. As you're watching this presentation, you're doing something else. You got another window open on your computer, or you're looking at your phone doing some other things. Yeah, I can see you. No, I'm joking. I can't really see you. But I know that because most of us are doing multiple things at once. Even as I'm giving this presentation, I have things on my mind. In his book, Getting Things Done, author David Allen talks about the fact that we carry open loops on our mind, things just going constantly. And when we don't manage those open loops, it leads to stress, which can lead to fatigue and burnout and mental health challenges. If you got mental health challenges, it's going to make them worse. So one of the things that you can do right now, if you're feeling overwhelmed, is do what I call a brain dump. Brain dump is when you take a piece of paper, write down everything that's on your mind. Not just things you need to do. It could be an idea that you have for a project. Maybe someone you're angry at, the ex you can't stop obsessing about. Doesn't matter what it is. Put it on paper. When you do that, I would love to tell you that it will take away your problems. I'd be very wealthy if I could say that. No, it will make them more manageable. In my home, I have a yellow legal pad in every room with a pen in case I need to do a brain dump. Right now, if you're feeling overwhelmed, take out that piece of paper and do a brain dump. Also, if you're busy throughout the day, here are 3 questions you can ask yourself to check in with yourself. And I encourage you to ask these to yourself right now during this presentation. The first one is, what am I feeling? So a few hours ago, I asked myself this, and I realized I was feeling depressed and a little anxious for my presentation with all of you. And it's important to be aware of what you're feeling. Now, sometimes I ask myself this, and I don't know. I go, what am I feeling? I don't know. That's okay. The important thing is to practice being aware of your feelings, even if you can't identify them. Next question, where is it located? There's this book that's taken over the world of mental health called The Body Keeps the Score, that talks about how we store emotions in our body. Trauma is stored in our body. Trauma is also generational sometimes. It's important to try to locate whatever you're feeling in your body. So I asked myself that question, where's it located? It was on my left side. I was feeling it somehow in my stomach, my depression. That's where it was all coming from. Locating it is another step in awareness. The third question, what do I need right now? I asked myself that a few hours ago, and I realized I just needed some water. Maybe I need a hug. Maybe I need to go out and stretch. Maybe I need a nap. Those 3 questions are so important, and I encourage you, I'm going to show you them again. What am I feeling? Where is it located? What do I need right now? Start asking yourself that throughout the day. So you have a brain dump, you've got these questions. And one final thing on self-care is castles. Look at that castle right there. I used to love TV shows with castles. Let me explain to you what a castle is. It's this giant brick building from medieval times. And it was surrounded by a body of water called a moat. So the moat was there, so you couldn't just walk up in the castle. They would have to let the drawbridge down for you. So let's say we're in medieval times and I approach the castle. I say, let me in, let me in. Someone would come on the roof and say, who goes there? And I'd say, Mike Veny, the mental health speaker. And if they thought that was okay, they would let the drawbridge down for me. If they didn't, they might shoot cannons at me. There is a reason I'm showing you this.
I'm side-eyeing you, right? And I was like,
please mute. Please mute.
Because I'm like, I'm going to work.
Thank you. The reason I'm showing you this is because there's something that you and I are letting the drawbridge down for. This mobile device right here. The moment I finish this presentation, I'm probably going to pick this up and look at it. Why? Cultural habit. One of the things that I've been hearing over the past 2 years is social media And news are stressing people out, giving people mental health challenges, actually. I want to end this once and for all. Social media is not stressing you out. On every social media site, there's an unfriend and unfollow button. It's a choice. You don't have to look at it. And when it comes to news, you can be selective about when you look at your news and what outlets you look at. Very, very important. These are some things you can start doing for self-care. Now, if you start doing this in the next 24 hours, any of the things I just shared, for some oddball reason, you're going to start to feel better about yourself. That's how you transform shame. How do you transform silence? Through conversations, having the conversation. You and I are doing that right now. This whole conference is about having conversations, right? But easier said than done. Back to my magic camera. There's something I know about you. I can see it through my camera, that you've got something on your mind that you've never shared with anyone. I can see through the camera. I'm just kidding. I cannot see through the camera. But I know that because most people do. You've got something on your mind you've never shared with anyone. Chances are that thing you've never shared is holding you hostage. The moment you share it in a safe space, you take your power back. I encourage you to share that thing that you've never shared. I'm about to talk about something that's very controversial. And, you know, I shouldn't be bringing this up right now. And I wasn't sure if I should talk about this, but I'm just going to give it a go. There's this restaurant in the United States of America called the Outback Steakhouse. I shouldn't be talking about this right now. I'm about to make myself real hungry. That's why it's controversial. There's a restaurant called the Outback Steakhouse, and they got this dish called the Bloomin' Onion. I don't know if you've ever seen this thing. What they do, they take a giant onion, they pierce it down the middle, they deep fry it. And this thing comes out and everybody looks at it in the restaurant. It gets to your table and disappears in like 2 minutes. This thing is so good. Making myself hungry. But if you look at the Bloomin' Onion, you can see the layers an onion has. But you and I both know an onion has layers. Let me say that again. When you look at the Bloomin' Onion, you can see the layers. But you and I both know an onion has layers. You and I are no different though.
Yeah.
There's, oh, can you mute, please? Sorry.
And that would have been fine. I would have been fine.
There's what you know about yourself, what you don't know about yourself, and what you didn't realize that you didn't know about yourself. That's where therapy and counseling come in. Therapy and counseling is about self-discovery. People think that's the place you got to go to if you're in a bad place. Yeah, you should. But for all of us, self-discovery, it's so important. And when you frame it from that Bloomin' Onion perspective that you're going to learn about your layers, it's a whole different experience. Now, some of you might be listening and going, okay, well, I've been to therapy before and I don't want to go back and tell my whole story again. I want to be honest with you. If you're thinking that, it's usually a sign that you need to go back and tell your whole story again. It's a process for discovery. Also, we talk about things a lot in this society, right? We love to run our mouths on social media. Mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine, right? Or even my favorite right here, Republicans and Democrats love to be fighting with each other. We're running our mouths about it all the time. We love to just fight with each other and all that. And whoa, look at that. Things you find on the internet. This hamster totally took a swipe at this other hamsters. They fight too. The important thing I'm bringing up here is we like to fight and run our mouths about so many things, but we need to do that about mental health. When we talk about it in a low voice, we are the stigma. It's not out there. It starts here. It's important to start having conversations in a normal voice about mental health. It's important to go to therapy, counseling. That's how you transform silence. You transform sabotage, social injustice, self-destructive behavior, and suicide through connection. One of the questions I get from people is, how can you tell if someone is struggling with mental health? Now, if you go on Google right now and type in signs and symptoms of depression, you get these long lists of things to look for. And I would always ask myself, how am I going to remember this list when I'm hanging out with my friend? I'm not going to remember it. But I realized that everything on those lists about signs and symptoms falls into one of three categories called the 3 outs, like baseball. The first out is out of character. The second out is out of nowhere. And the third out is out of the group. Let me explain each. Out of character means someone in your life is behaving in a way over the past week or so that's different from what you would expect. Maybe you have a coworker who is usually on time for meetings, but for the past few weeks, they've been late. Maybe you're a student who hasn't been turning in your work lately. Maybe someone you know is not taking care of their hygiene lately. That's out of character for the person. That means they're probably struggling with something with their mental health. The second out is out of nowhere. Someone just out of nowhere has a temper tantrum, or they start crying, or they decide to just randomly move across the country. Chances are they're struggling. And the third out is out of the group. They isolate from friends, family, coworkers. Out of character, out of nowhere, and out of the group. Remember those three things. You'll be able to quickly tell if someone in your life is struggling with their mental health. It's not a perfect system, but it can really, really help you uncover that. No advice zone. I am actually working with a therapist. I'm not a therapist, but I'm working with a therapist who's helping me learn about difficult emotions. He invited me to this big workshop where he was training other therapists, and I was just there kind of watching. And I saw this sign on the wall that said no advice zone. So I said to him, I said, what's up with that sign, no advice zone? And he said, oh, he got everyone's attention. He said, everybody, Mike just asked about the no advice zone sign. In my studio, you're not allowed to give advice. And we all looked very confused. He said, why can't we give advice? He said, because the moment you give advice to someone, it's never about the other person. It's about hearing yourself give advice and feel good about yourself doing it. So what do you say to someone who's struggling with mental health challenges? The worst thing you could do is give advice. But here are some things that can actually work, but follow directions carefully. The first thing you can say is, help me understand. And when you say that, pause and let it be really awkward. Another thing you can say is, how can I support you? And when you say that, pause and let it be really awkward. If you're at work and you're a manager and someone on your team is struggling, you can ask, what kind of flexibility do you need from me? Pause and let it be awkward. Notice the pattern here? Pause and let it be awkward. We as humans don't like awkward conversations. No, we run away from them real fast. But in order for a mental health conversation to be effective, it needs to be as awkward as it possibly can. Remember what I said in the beginning of the presentation. Mental health challenges are confusing, complex, and frustrating. If you ask somebody about what's going on, they don't answer you right away. It's because it's confusing, complex, and frustrating. When you have that awkward pause, you give them the space to maybe work through some of that and maybe even trust you enough with what's on their mind. Help me understand. How can I support you? What kind of flexibility do you need from me? That's one way you can start connecting with people more. The third thing I want to bring up here, we are on Zoom. I think Zoom has now become a normal part of life. And I don't know if you've noticed throughout this presentation, but sometimes I take a moment to look into the camera like this and look in your eyes. I'm doing that intentionally. I learned that one of the best things you can do to connect with someone who's struggling is take a moment to look in their eyes and just see their humanity. And the reason I've been doing that throughout the presentation is because I want to connect with you, and hopefully you feel that as I'm looking at you. I encourage you in this remote learning world and remote work world that we're in to take moments when you're on Zoom or FaceTime to just look into the camera and imagining looking into the person's eyes and just seeing their humanity. They will feel that on the other end. And as we start to do it more in person, I challenge you, take a moment to look into someone's eyes and see their humanity. Out of all the tips that I have been given for self-care, this is one of the top 2. It will change your life. It will change someone else's life. So in summary, you transform shame through self-care. You transform silence through conversation. You transform sabotage, social injustice, self-destructive behavior, and suicide through connection. That's how you transform stigma into strength. But back to hamsters. There is absolutely no point to this slide that I'm showing you. I thought it was cute. I found some hamster picture online and I'm just putting it up here. But I want to let you know that I have graduated beyond a hamster as a pet. And I have a dog. That's my dog, Pippin, right there. And I just wanted to show you him. He usually travels with me. And I just came home. I've been away speaking. And so he was really happy to see me. I want to let you know that I am the co-host of the Better Mental podcast. Check it out on your favorite podcast app. We talk about some real stuff and have some great conversations. Also, my company is accredited by IACET, the International Accreditors for Continuing Education and Training, Society for Human Resources Management and HRCI. We give CEUs for courses. So I have a course on my website right now that we just created called Connectivity and Conversations. So I encourage you to check that out and get CEUs, and you can learn about talking about mental health at work. So I encourage you to check that out. And I want to ask you this: what's your next step? Since this is a learning opportunity for all of you, what's your next step? I want to ask you a favor. Can you go on LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn, and send me a message and let me know what's the one thing that you are going to apply that you learned today from me in the next 24 hours. That's your assignment. Find me on LinkedIn, send me a message, let me know. Might take me a week or so to get back to you, but I promise I definitely will. And in summary, I just want to say thank you. You know, I appreciate you all being on here. It was really nice to look at the number of people coming into the room and stuff. It made me feel good, and appreciate you all staying on the call. And I'm on social media. You can follow me on social media. But I want to go back to something. The first thing I said to you was that for the past 2 years, people throughout the world have experienced anger, grief, and fear at an unprecedented level. Anger, grief, and fear. We don't like to talk about those emotions. I've heard them referred to as negative emotions. Some people say they're even evil. Anger, grief, and fear. I want to share a secret with you that I wish I would have learned when I was a kid. If I had learned this secret, I don't think I would have gotten to go to the mental hospital. I don't think I would have been expelled from school. I don't think I would have attempted to die by suicide. I want to share this secret with you. If you take nothing else from this presentation, I want you to take this secret. And the secret is this: anger, grief, and fear are 3 of the best emotions you could ever have, and you need them for success in life, and you need to start chasing them more. Let me explain. Let's start with fear. I know you've been feeling a lot of fear in the past 2 years. I have too. Fear, when you don't deal with it, becomes anxiety. If you got anxiety, it's going to make it worse. But when you learn to sit with your fear and just feel it, not run away from it, not make it go away, but feel it and talk about it in counseling or therapy, fear quickly transforms into vision and courage. You need your fear. And then there's grief. As I talk about grief, I know that many of you have lost people. And I know that there's nothing that I can say that can take away your grief. Just know that you're in my thoughts and prayers. Grief is heavy. Grief lingers. If you don't deal with your grief, it turns into depression. If you've got depression, it's going to make it so much worse. Grief is heavy. But when you learn to feel it, not run away from it, not avoid it, not distract yourself, and you talk about it with a mental health professional, over time, slowly, grief transforms into joy. But you have to be willing to do the work. But I've saved the best for last: anger. Anger has actually become my favorite emotion, and I actually believe it's the most useful emotion you can have. Now, it might make you uncomfortable to hear that, because oftentimes when we think of anger, we think of hostility and violence, but they're 2 different things. Hostility and violence are behaviors. Anger is a feeling. Anger, when you learn to sit with it and feel it, express it in a healthy way, talk about it with a mental health professional, anger very quickly transforms into passion, decisiveness, and successful leadership. Anger, grief, and fear are 3 of the best emotions you could ever have. I encourage you, as you navigate the world in this difficult time we're in, when those emotions come up, learn to hang out with them, learn to become friends with them, learn to work with them, learn to start chasing them. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for your time and thank you for your trust. We're going to take some time for questions.
Awesome, Mr. Veny, Mike. Thank you so much for your words of inspiration, your transparency, your encouragement. Just excellent, excellent. So we're going to open this up for Q&A and ask questions. I know we've seen some very active chat taking place in the chat function. So thank you guys for doing that, and please continue. But we'd also like for you to ask questions, and they're popping in. So I'm going to get started. One question you may not know the answer to, but I think this is great. Are there any resources for drum workshops in the Austin area that you can connect us with?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I would say go to Google and yeah, type in drumming Austin, drumming workshops Austin. Thank you.
I love that. You know, I don't know is an answer. We got to learn to feel and sit and be comfortable with that, right?
Awkward, right?
Awkward. Also, how do you help someone who acknowledges they need help, but they actively avoid getting help?
You know, when you have to confront someone who's struggling, it's not a one and done thing. And like I said, advising someone, pushing, hey, you need to do this, often puts up a wall between you and the other person. I think one thing that has helped a lot of people who struggle and are avoiding getting help is you getting help yourself, actually, and telling them about you going to therapy. So if you're my friend and you know you need to go to therapy or find a psychologist or something because things are really bad, but you're avoiding it, and I'm your friend, I'm going to be telling you every time I talk to you about, oh, I was in therapy this week, here's what we learned. And eventually it's probably going to make you go, so what else happens in therapy? You might start asking questions, and that's the key. So the key is to invite the person to come to that on their own and create that space for them. That's the important thing. Now, if someone is threatening violence or suicide, that's an emergency right there. That's a whole different thing. But it's important to, encourage it, but do it in a very soft way where it's not pushing on the person, because again, the shame is there. That's the big wall. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. So another question is, when you were a child, how were you able to convince staff in a psychiatric hospital to discharge you 3 times?
You want to know my hack? Oh my gosh.
What's the psychiatric hospital hack? How do you get out? 3 times as a kid? You had some great negotiating skills, right?
I always tell people that's when I became a professional speaker, when I had to really be persuasive. I just, when you're in a mental hospital, and I know they've changed over time, but you know what? It feels like prison in a sense, because I remember, all my belongings being taken away and, isolated. Right across from the mental hospital in 4th grade was the county jail, by the way. And it was like, they got the same rights as me, and I just didn't want to be there. It's very isolating and doesn't feel good. And so I just was so determined to get out of there. I just wanted to be free. And that really got me to really think about, what do I need to say to convince these people? I would just convince them that I had coping skills. And that's what I did. I was very clear and articulate about my coping skills. That's how they let me out. So thank you for that question. No one's ever asked me that.
That's a good one for sure. So this one was, I did not ask this question. This was not my question, but boy, this certainly fits me. Do you find making time for self-care is hard? And how do you do that?
At first you have to force it in, because it's not normal. It's like, usually we're just going with other people's agenda or things we need to do. But I want to give you an example from today that's happening right now. Before this presentation, I have one of those Apple Watches. I said, oh my gosh, where's the charger? I charged it, and it's hopefully charged by now. And the reason is because right after this presentation, I have to get to the gym. And my wife said, but it's date night tonight. And I said, okay, but I got to get to the gym first.
Meet me at the gym.
Meet me at the gym. So the point is, I have to force it in there sometimes. Yeah. But here's the thing with self-care. Once you get into a routine, it actually becomes habit. You start to just realize, oh, when I wake up, I do this, get a glass of water. you know? And so it's just baby steps. But once you get into a habit, it's great. There's so many great books out there on self-care and morning routines. A great book, by the way, is called The Miracle Morning, that talks about how to create a morning routine for yourself and how to get that habit going. So thank you for that question. That was a great question.
So you talked about fear, gave the example of fear, anger, and grief. And so someone asked if you could repeat the example of fear, anger, and grief.
Sure. Fear, when you learn to feel it and talk about it with a mental health professional, will quickly transform into vision and courage. I try to give a lot of energy when I present. I try to give a lot of energy. It comes from my anxiety. Prior to this presentation, I was shaking. I was scared. I don't know if I can do this. What are these people going to think of me? How's my presentation going? Yeah, mine's going. But that transformed into courage. No, you got to help these people out. Give them something, Mike. Transformed. You got to see that happen today. When it comes to grief, when you learn to feel it, sometimes in life we avoid these emotions. That's why I'm bringing it up. We don't like them. We go, we distract myself. You know, let me do something. Let's talk about something else, right? But when you learn to just be with it and sit with it, grief will slowly transform into joy, and anger will transform into passion, decisiveness, and successful leadership.
I jotted that down. I really like that. That's awesome. So someone asked, what does anger become when you don't deal with it, when it's undealt with?
Look at the news. No, anger becomes hostility and violence. For many men, especially in the Black community, anger is depression in disguise.
Yeah.
It's depression in disguise, but you know, we have this whole strong Black man thing, and like I said, a culture of honor. So we, you know, it gets bottled up. Emotions need to go somewhere. You can't just bottle up and file it away. We wish that could happen. We try to think we can compartmentalize, and I'm just going to put this to rest. Nobody can compartmentalize. It's impossible. So it's really important to learn to address your feelings and sit with them. It's so scary to do it first. When I was angry and I had to first sit with my anger, it was one night I was just so angry. I said, okay, we're going to sit in the living room. I got out of bed. All right, anger, and just feel angry. It was so scary. It was so intense, but it was so freeing too. So freeing. So I challenge you to start sitting with those difficult emotions.
I think that's such awesome advice. And I really love that the anger, grief, and silence. Or anger, silence is probably good. Anger, grief, and fear. I just think looking at how you can transform those into other feelings, with your fear into vision and courage, and your grief into joy, and your anger into, I have blooming onion. I pointed the arrow to the wrong thing. Anger to your passion, decisiveness, and successful leadership. I just think that's such awesome advice and such wonderful, rich tools that we can take with us. So thank you for sharing those.
Thank you.
So someone says they understand that you have a book, and does that book talk about your experience that you shared today? And shared also that she has a friend whose story sounds like a struggle she has with her child, and she thinks that story would be beneficial. And so it was more of a question, do you have a book that talks about your experience?
Yes, if you
that you
go on
shared today?
Amazon right now, I've got quite a few books now, but it's called Transforming Stigma. It's got a superhero mask on it. That shares my story in much more detail and goes over those same 3 points of transforming stigma in more detail. Also has a lot of resources, hotlines, and stuff like that in the back of it. So I encourage you to get a copy for your friend.
Awesome. I know I've spent a lot of time working with young people and their families, with young people that were struggling so hard, and a lot of males as well, a lot of males of color. And what advice would you give to a parent? Your mom, you said, was a change agent definitely in your life. And I guess it was about your sophomore year when you really took an interest even more in drumming. What advice would you have for parents who just feel like giving up, who lose that hope with their young person because they're just exhausted, they're tired?
Well, one thing I want to tell the parents out there, if you have a child who's struggling, and I want you to remember this forever, it doesn't mean you're a bad parent. Oftentimes, parents are privately struggling because it's like, well, I must have failed at something. Why is my kid like this? No, your kid's like that because they're human and they're breathing. We all struggle with different things, and there's no one reason for it. It's environment, it's genetics, all these different things. So the other thing as a parent that I would encourage, and I wish my parents would have done, is actually go to therapy for yourself. Go to therapy for yourself. It does two things. Number one, gives you an outlet to talk about some of those things that you're struggling with your child, and you get to be a role model for your child. So that's what I encourage to parents.
Thank you so much. You've mentioned that twice now, that as you're trying to encourage someone else to get the help they need, and it may seem like they don't want to, or they're not ready to do that you have to take care of yourself. And this conference all started, one, for individuals with lived mental health experience, but also their caregivers. And so I think that's just such a rich jewel to share with our caregivers, is that you have to take care of yourself first, or in addition to. And oftentimes we neglect that because we're so busy helping and worrying and being concerned about the person that we're seeing that's struggling or hurting or in pain that we love. So, yeah. So other questions, and if please, I know I'm not sure about how much time we have. I'm trying to look at the chat and the questions and keep my eye contact just right and all that good stuff.
And by the way, I can't see the chat, but you said there was a lot going on in there, so.
Absolutely. Other questions, if someone wants to come off mic and ask a question, or if you want to put it in the chat, that would be awesome. There is a question: is the workbook different from the book?
Yes. So the book, can I just tell you about this book real quick? Like,
please do.
You ever send a text message to someone that you don't want to send, or an email, and like you hit send and like turn off the computer?
Get it back? Can I get it back?
Yeah. Or so you don't want to see the response. Like, I'm going to text it. I'm going to leave the room right now. Right. So
absolutely.
I hit publish on Amazon, kind of like that. I was like, turn it off. And within the first week, it went to #1 for an entire week in children's health, teen health, and mental illness. And we are just shipping those books out all over. The Transforming Stigma book is my story and how to transform stigma in detail. The workbook is so you can explore some of the concepts that I'm talking about in a group setting or with yourself for journaling. Sometimes I even pick up the workbook and just open it up to some random questions and do some journaling with it. So that's what the workbook is for. Thank you for that.
Awesome. So just so you know, we love to leave people with some nuggets and just with some encouragement. Some feedback that we received was, one person said that you are a fantastic speaker and presenter. They love how you look into the camera, and to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Also, that this has been very insightful, and thank you for sharing your story, and that they are taking away how important it is to find your strengths and your passions. And they've learned so much concerning mental health and felt that this was so insightful, very informative, and all these things you'll get when you get your, what's that feedback stuff you get? The feedback that you get from the evaluations, but just thought it would be helpful for you to take those things with you, for you to stay encouraged and to continue doing what you do, because you're making a difference for people just by sharing your journey, your challenges, and being so transparent. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And just to everyone, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on my website. Reach out to me. I'm not a mental health professional, but I might be able to direct you to some resources if you need it. And just please keep in touch. And thank you again for hanging out with me today.
And I would correct that. You say you're not a licensed mental health professional, maybe, but you definitely are a mental health expert.
Thank you.
So I would work on that phrasing of that. Your lived experience definitely can far exceed what some schooling can, for sure. So thank you so much again for your transparency and for sharing with us the way that you have this afternoon.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Am I cutting this off too soon? Are we good? Are we almost to the
Vicki,
end?
I have one burning question.
Oh, please.
And Mike,
Evan.
thank you so much for this great presentation. My question has to do with suicide in the Black community. I know it happens a lot in other communities too, but recently there've been highlight on that with Regina King's son, the former Miss America, as well as an elected official out in the Maryland area. And so how can we help our communities to address this?
we're doing better, but still there are challenges. And one thing I encourage people to think about, I did this article years ago called Depression versus the Strong Black Man. That was the title, catchy title, right? And I decided to look up on Google the definition of a strong Black man so I could put it in the article. Well, guess what? After about an hour, I couldn't find a definition. So here's this term, this myth, this story we throw around to each other, strong Black woman, strong Black man, but there's no real definition of what that is. That's an opportunity to start to define that for ourselves. And I believe that defining that can include talking about our vulnerabilities, areas where we're struggling. That's so important. And in addition to that, one thing we can also do in the Black community, the churches have a lot of influence in the Black community, getting them involved in the mental health conversation. Sometimes churches are very resistant because they're like, if you're struggling, that means you just need Jesus. You didn't pray enough or whatever. But they're slowly getting on board. So it's really important to connect with them and share with them, look, it's important to give your people resources, encouraging pastors to talk about their mental health, because pastors don't talk to their congregations usually about it. They end up calling me at midnight and I gotta be like, why are you bothering me about this? Go find your other pastor friends and go meet at Starbucks. So the thing is, we just have to create some new intentional strategies around how we interact with each other. And that's the important thing, is just thinking about that as we interact. The other thing I just want to say in the Black community, sometimes mental health is actually glorified in a way, or mental illness. Like in certain neighborhoods, you might have that one guy on the street named Sparky. Everybody knows Sparky because Sparky's like, he's always talking to himself, whatever. And it's like, oh, here he goes. And people egg him on. Well, Sparky might have schizophrenia and needs help. And so it's important that we start educating people with language to use. A lot of times in the Black community, we don't use the same language around mental health. There's a website too called Therapy in Color that I'm encouraging people of color to check out. My friend Ashley owns that site and is doing a lot with it. But I think ultimately it's an ongoing conversation, especially to young people. And it's really important to assume that everyone in our life is not okay, and always check in on people. I don't care how confident they appear, how much they're smiling, or how much money they're making. Are you okay?
Thank you, Evan,
Thank
for
you.
asking that question. I think that's so timely right now, given where we are and all that's been going on lately. We actually had another question come in and we're scheduled to end at 3:30, so we have time for it. The question is, what are the 3 points you mentioned regarding someone that needs support? It was the 3 outs.
Three
Definitely.
outs: out of character, out of nowhere, and out of the group. Behavior that's out of character for the person, doing something out of nowhere, isolating from the group, out of the group.
Awesome. And so how might someone go about and even begin talking with someone regarding any of their concerns about the 3 outs? What would you recommend?
Can you, I'm not sure I understand that question.
So if someone's acting out of character, or if someone isolates them from the group, what's a good way that someone can approach them about their concerns?
One way to start the conversation is, you don't seem like yourself. My favorite way, I do this on my team. This is a leadership one. So anyone that has, actually I have a meeting after this with someone on my team. And the first thing I ask is, so what's on your mind? Gets them opening up. Open-ended questions are important to ask. What's on your mind? What's making you think that? Why do you think you feel that way? What happened today in that situation? Those are important ways to go about the conversation to get the person talking. That's the goal, is to get them running their mouth about what's going on. But just saying, you don't seem like yourself. But if you're really concerned about someone, like it's not looking good, are you okay? Yes or no? And usually, even if they try to tell you they're okay, you can tell in their eyes, like they're not, and they're going to need, emergency help.
Okay, any more questions? I'm looking at, if anyone has a question, you don't type it in the chat. If you'd like to raise your hand, and then we can get to you through your raising your hand in Hoover.
Oh, I have a question.
Sure.
I want to come back to Texas. So, so how can we get me back to Texas? That's my question. So
You know,
no,
we,
if any of you are ever interested in having me back down, just reach out to me on my website. But I love your barbecue. I'm just going to say that.
oh man, that's good stuff. What is your favorite food to eat when you're down south?
Ribs.
Oh,
And Chandra, I think, is raising her hand over there. And you're muted, Chandra.
if you can unmute yourself.
Hi.
There you go.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This has been the most fun that I've had all day. And for such a serious and important conversation, that's a really big deal because I was thoroughly engaged and I took so many notes. I've learned a lot. I think I have a lot to share. I'm looking forward to some conversations with some people. My question for you is about the drum workshops that you do. I'm wondering if you've ever done any of the drum workshops with the members of the deaf community.
I've worked with people with different disabilities. I haven't really, I guess, yes, members of the deaf community included in the drum circle. Yeah. One of the things that is great is the instruments I use. You can sometimes just putting your hand out and just feel the vibration, you can really feel the pulse of it. So it makes it very, very inclusive. So the cool thing about the fleet of drums that I use, it's a very inclusive fleet. Even if someone's in a wheelchair and cannot basically move, I have a drum for them too that they can hold, and it's just amazing to see how much they enjoy it. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very creative outlet that could benefit the deaf community, I think. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. I just saw your question in the chat and I'm kind of scrolling through those. Thank you for coming on camera and asking that.
You got two more hands up.
This is Dr. Martin. This is Rosalie Martin. May I speak, please?
Please, Dr. Martin.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank
My
you.
question is, once you realize that a person is out of character, out of nowhere, things happen and out of the group, and you try to get them to communicate with you with such questions as you ask, help me to understand, and yet they're totally silent or will not engage with you in any way, how do you move forward?
Okay, and I know we have about a minute left on the clock here, but the thing I wanted to say with that is that's where the whole awkward thing comes up. Let that awkward silence be there. Give them that space, because we end up starting to feel the need we need to talk and say something because they're quiet. The key is we need to learn to be comfortable with that awkward silence,
But even in that, they're silent and they live in silence. They're fine with silence, and yet they need help. They're not harming themselves or others, so you don't have to. That's not the issue. But in terms of relationship and communicating with each other, living a life that is just not the way the person has lived before.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a longer conversation here, and I was going to say, if you want to shoot me an email, I'm just going to give it to you. My email address is mike@mikeveny.com. You want to shoot me an email because I know some of you also have questions, but we're out of time here. But I was going to ask, if you want to email me your questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them through email and even possibly set up a phone call if we have time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mike. And thanks, Dr. Martin, for that question. I'm so glad you're here with us today. So again, we just want to thank you, Mike. And I bet folks in Texas would love to see you and probably bring you a whole different bunch of ribs to try. So definitely when things get better and the world clears up a little bit, hopefully you can join us in Texas in person when we meet for this amazing conference.
Awesome.
So thank you again. And just remember and remind folks, if you can take a few minutes to complete the evaluation, the workshop survey, at the end of the day, make sure you're completing the general evaluation, telling us what you thought about this conference. We work really hard, and I want to thank and acknowledge Lady Jane, first of all, and the amazing team, committee members that have been working so diligently on this conference to make this visual and virtual experience a positive and life-changing experience for all of us. So thanks to everyone that's made that happen. If you need CEUs, please remember to fill out the forms and make sure that you're doing the evaluation so that you can get your certificate, and the chat link, the links are available in your chat. So There's one session left. Don't bail out on us yet. Thank you guys for staying with us through this session. Please go and support the final session that's left, the final 3 sessions. And again, thank you for being here. Thanks again, and please be safe and take good care until we see you again. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Miss Vicky, I think I'm gonna have to